Swampthangg here with another deck guide. This time, we're talking about Burn Mage. I've been having so much fun playing this deck over the last week or so. This deck has everything that I'm looking for. It's got impactful minions to play. It's got a ton of card draw, so it feels like every single game you've got a chance to either find the solution or get out of trouble. And it's got a absolutely ridiculous amount of burn from hand, especially when you combine it with all the spell power minions in this deck. This deck can definitely tilt your opponent. There's been multiple games where I've either been down to 5 or 10 health and been able to do 25 from hand with 2 fireballs because I've had enough spell power on the board. The win condition of this deck's pretty simple. You cast Fireball at their face, and you cast Mask of Cthulhu when they have no minions on board, and then they're dead. To make sure that they're dead, we have lots of spell damage minions to make these spells even more powerful. And the kicker is Aegwynn the Guardian. Every single time this card dies, the next card you draw has +2 spell damage. So if you're able to play this early in the game, then you draw a lab partner. Now that lab partner has +3 spell damage for 1 mana, which is absolutely insane. That turns a Ruined Orb pretty much into a fireball. That turns your Cram Session into drawing 4 cards for 2 mana. And when your Imprisoned Phoenix comes out from being dormant, it's going to have +4 spell damage, which allows you to cast a 10 damage fireball, a 14 damage Mask of Cthulhu that might have been discounted with Incanter's Flow. You can pair together 15 damage Mask of Cthulhu's with 11 damage fireballs and completely wipe your opponent from 30 to 0. So far, the biggest fireball I've cast has been 13 damage. I actually had the opportunity to turn it into a 15 damage fireball, but I wanted to cast 2 of them in the same turn. So I stuck with just the 26 damage for 6 mana because they were both discounted. This deck feels really consistent because it has so many ways to draw cards. You have Arcane Intellect, which is the classic mage draw. You've got the new Refreshing Spring Water, which, while this is not a complete spell deck, most of the time you are going to get at least 1 spell. So this is like a 2 mana draw 2, and sometimes it's a 0 mana draw 2, which is awesome. Once you use Incanter's Flow, being able to cast a Refreshing Spring Water into an Arcane Intellect that gets you a Cram Session that you play with your spell damage minion, you can draw 10 cards in a turn, and they'll be discounted. And in the next turn, with spell power, you're just going to kill your opponent. It's super tilting from them. It's super fun to play. At any point, you could draw a card that is going to take you from 2 cards to 10 cards, and you're going to have an out for whatever situation you're looking for. Where this deck does struggle is against aggro matchups. If you're not playing the version with Cone of Cold, the only way to clear wide boards is either Devolving Missiles and getting lucky on if they have a big minion, Brain Freeze, or Shooting Star. Shooting Star is fantastic in this deck because if you have any spell damage, this card can do 2 to 3 to multiple minions, or even just on 1 minion to get it out of the way. This card has saved me multiple times. If you are running the version with Cone of Cold, having both that and Shooting Star can lead to some times in the early game where you have a really weak hand, where you have 2 Cones of Cold, Shooting Stars, Devolving Missiles, Brain Freeze, Primordial Studies, and you don't really have any cards to build a board, pressure your opponent at all, or draw, but your hand is full at the same time. That's like the only time where I feel like I might actually want to cut some of those cards, which leads me to going back and forth whether or not I have Cone of Cold or Wand Thief in the deck. Another option is to include 1 or 2 Apexis Blasts. As I said, this isn't a pure spell deck. There are minions in here, but just having an additional 5 damage that could also be boosted with spell power to get over the top against control matchups makes a huge difference. Against Control Warrior and Warlocks with Lifesteal, if you just need a little extra damage to get over the top, having that Apexis would be really nice. There's been a few games where I've had to get very lucky with what my Mask of Cthulhu hits because it was the last burn I had. Because you're not going to do any minion damage with this deck. So if your burn isn't being used effectively, or you somehow burn one of your burn cards, having a little extra would be really nice. And if you do save it to the end, you'd also get a minion out of it to help finish the game. When it comes to the Mulligan, the most important card to have is Incanter's Flow. Discounting your cards early is a little bit slow to start, especially against aggro matchups. It can feel tough to play this card, but once you start drawing cards and having them discounted, you're going to be able to snowball and win the game back, and then you're not going to look back from there. Having discounted fireballs to close out the game, discounted draw, discounted cram sessions to draw even more cards, is definitely going to help you in the long run. After Incanter's Flow, I think the most important cards you can have after that are all draw. Cram session with a lab partner to be able to draw on 2 or 3, depending on if you have the coin. Or if you've got Imprisoned Phoenix, you can play Cram session on 4 to get 3 cards. If you have no other draw in your mulligan, I would consider keeping Arcane Intellect. It's definitely the weakest of the draw cards, but just having any draw is super important. And definitely keep Refreshing Springwater, especially if you have the coin. You can't play this until turn 4, but if you've played Incanter's Flow at this point, being able to draw 2 cards and get most likely 2 to 4 mana back will set you up for a lot of success in the mid game. Against control, I always keep Aegwynn. Being able to play this on 4 if you have the coin, or even 3 if you play Primordial Studies to discount this by 1, sets you up so well for the rest of the game. Every single minion you draw after this card gets destroyed is going to have that additional +2 spell damage, which makes everything in your deck stronger. Your Runed Orbs become fireballs, your Cone of Colds and Shooting Stars can clear wide boards, your fireballs become deadly, your Masks of Cthulhu will clear their entire board and do damage to the face, and it sets you up to use cram sessions better. Essentially, they can't deal with that much spell power throughout the game. If you play Aegwynn early against control, you're going to win the game. As I said earlier, I can't get enough of playing this deck. I've been playing it the last few days. It's super fun. Opponents get super tilted, and it always seems like there's a way out of the situation. Not only is this deck super fun to play, it's also very competitive. At this point, I've played about 75 games with the deck at Legend, and I have just over a 60% win rate. And I think I could get that even higher now that I've had a chance to play around with the deck. Also, the inclusion of Cone of Cold has really helped out when I start running into more aggro matchups. I originally started playing this deck as I wanted something to combat control priests and warlocks that I was facing when I was playing Rush Warrior, and I can say the deck has been extremely successful at that. I have over an 80% win rate against warlocks, priests, and other mages. The only decks I have a losing win rate against are paladins, hunters, and demon hunters. Demon hunters is a weird matchup where you're really just racing to see if you can get your burn before they get their OTK combo. You definitely want to draw as fast as you can and line up your burst in the window. Otherwise, they're going to use their lifesteal to get out of range of your burst, or just give themselves more time to draw their OTK combo. Aggro decks are definitely challenging. You're going to have to sacrifice a pretty sizable amount of your health pool to make it through the early game, but if you are able to clear their board and get some discounted spells and get your draw engine going, you're definitely going to have enough to win the game. So even if it seems like there's no way you're going to survive 2 more turns, this deck has enough outs and it can draw so fast through the deck to find you a solution. You can also toy with your opponents, which is pretty fun, where they think they're going to close out the game in the next turn or 2, and you've got 1 to 2 Imprisoned Phoenix. Maybe one of them's been buffed up with Aegwynn's Death Rattle, and when those come out of being dormant and you can do a 13 to 15 damage fireball from hand that's been discounted down to 2 because you've played Incanter's Flow, is the best feeling. There's been multiple people that have sent me friend requests after the game to give me their thoughts on the deck, and it's usually not been the nicest thing said to me. So that's it for the Burn Mage guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you give this deck a try. If you have any thoughts of what you like about the deck or things you've thought about changing, drop it in the comments or come chat about it on the stream. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/Swampthangg every Monday, Thursday, and sometimes Saturday. Come say hi. A bunch of games that I played on stream. There's some highlights. There's definitely some lowlights. There's a sweet comeback with Solarian Prime and a bunch of other really awesome games in there. Hope you enjoy. If you like this deck guide and you want to see more like it in the future, think about giving me a like or subscribe below. I plan on uploading a bunch of deck guides over the coming weeks, including meta decks, fun decks, and hopefully some tips and tricks that you can use to either hit Legend for the first time or just improve with a deck. Thanks.